We trained all throughout the next few nights, and all of it, every minute, was only a repeat of the first few hours. 1 hit in 3 days. All I could even land was one lousy hit on him. And on the third night of being practically beaten to a pulp, Akaza had finally called it quits for now. And I found myself more sore than I'd ever been before. Not just physically, but mentally. I couldn't even bring myself to move any much after that. I simply laid on the ground, focusing on my rigid breathing while doing anything I could to ignore the agonizing pain I was in. It was all as though he targeted every position of my body, striking it over and over again by means of making me suffer. I stared upwards. Judging by the lightning sky, I assumed it was now early morning. The air now becoming warmer, yet my body was still numb from the hours I'd spent outside. The inside of me, however, wasn't cold. In fact, it was almost alit with an inner fire. My heart felt like it was beating, burning, each pump sending soaring flames along my veins with each time I couldn't land another hit on the demon I fought. I was in anger with myself, anger at Akaza too. You need to eat, the demon said from somewhere around me. His footsteps sounded, and suddenly he was crouched and hovering over me, blocking the view I had on the dark blue sky. I didn't even say anything, instead just closed my eyes and calming myself. I don't want to eat. Akaza sighed, and I peered an eye open to see his pink brows furrowed in annoyance. I don't really care. You have to eat, or all of this is worth nothing. I grumbled, preparing myself to sit up before abruptly, Akaza avoiding the collapsation of our skulls. He stood up, crossing his arms as he looked down at me. After a few moments of glancing between us, he eventually sighed once more before turning around and beginning his walk back into the house. I glanced up at his annoying departure fully of authority. And what about you? I asked. He paused his pursuit, turning his head to side without looking back fully at me. What about me? I let out a hard breath. You. Aren't you going to eat as well? A moment of silence between us before he let out an amused laugh. Then a sudden flash of pink, one I was all too familiar with now, and he was simply gone. Before I even registered it, he was perched in front of me now, only inches away from my face, with his golden eyes set ablaze with a hint of excitement that matched his smile. When we'd first met, a move like this would have shocked me, maybe even would have made me stumble back with his utter speed, but I'd grown used to it by now. So I didn't flinch, or even blink at him as he smiled at me. Instead, I reflected my own inner fire into his eyes, matching his own. Are you offering? He asked in a flirty tone, tilting his head. My mind suddenly blinked, and my heart started to pound faster as I realized how close we were, actually. Now it was a strange feeling, one that had happened so often, yet at the same time, no, I couldn't seem to get used to it. My heartbeat seemed to speed up each time, my insides lighting up with warming. Our alarms ringing through my head, my mind at war with itself, the one part of me screaming to run away in fear due to his strength, and the other being drawn to that strength, because in truth, I wanted his strength. It was why I couldn't move away. You won't eat me, Akaza. I somehow knew, through his gut instincts, that I was speaking the truth. With a remark, for whatever reason of his own, he wouldn't devour me. He couldn't. I knew, even if he licked his lips, giving me an odd look. Are you sure about that? I couldn't tell if he was trying to test me somehow, seeing how deep my need to be stronger really was, to see whether I would allow him to get this close without being scared, and I wasn't going to give him any sort of satisfaction in that. Yeah, I said, letting out an amused sigh, showing I was bored with these sort of encounters. I pushed myself upwards, and he moved back to allow me to have space to do so. It took everything in me to ignore the pain in my body that it was in as I moved, but I swallowed it down, stretching to appear as though it was mere nothing. Now, I said, relaxing as I stood, I'm gonna go eat, but there's no way in hell I'm eating your food. He tilted his head, arms crossed again, as I began to walk forward as he replied, and that's why. Your food is terrible, I stated simply as I paused in front of him again. What I'd said wasn't entirely true, but I could give a damn well better job of the dish he'd made. So I'll be the one to cook, if you don't mind. His voice slightly changed, and I paused, a sense of annoyance growing in it. It was my turn to smile now, knowing that there was still some way I could get to him, even if it wasn't physically. I'd like to see you try and make something better, he snapped, looking down at his nose at me. I grinned. You don't have a kitchen, do you? Let's go and see for ourselves. Without waiting for him to respond, I walked past him and over to the house, not having to look back to know he was trailing behind, grumbling more to himself than anything. With all the bickering, I almost forgot the defeat I was feeling. The rage inside me had begun to simmer down, just slightly. Son of a... I seethed down as I burnt my finger on the splashed water. It was boiling. It was a boiling point. Akaza let out a slight laugh. Having some trouble, aren't we? He had been watching me this entire time, his infinite amount of patience keeping me leaning on the wall in mere curiosity. I blew on my injury, wrapping my hand around it in an attempt of cooling it. You know, you could actually help me instead of watching me like I'm doing some sort of performance. He furrowed his pink brows. I assume you didn't want my opinion on cooking, considering how you felt about my food? I rolled my eyes, sucking on my finger, whilst moving over to work on the cooking of vegetables. Plus, Akaza continued, I figured performance were your thing. I raised an eyebrow, giving him a side-eye glance. What's that supposed to mean? He grunts, pushing himself off the wall he'd been leaning on, making his way over to me. I turned to watch his muscular figure come closer, those same alarm bells ringing off inside me. Your first words to me, you remember? I paused my mind, flashing back to the first time I had spoken directly to him, and I rolled my eyes once again, my focusing turning away from him and back to the food in dismissal. In my peripheral vision, I could sense him tilt his head as he stood by my side, stirring the boiling food, adding any chopped spices here and there. You sure hate being wrong, don't you? He inquired. I glanced at him quickly. And would I enjoy that? He shrugged, moving back over to the wall once more, taking his same position. Who knows? Humans are all kinds of strange. I hummed, not entirely focused on his response as I finished up my work. So, you haven't or aren't going to eat any of this? I asked without looking at him, serving a single dish for myself. No. It was my turn to shrug. Your loss. If only you could see how excellent of a cook I am, I said, bringing the dish I made over to eat. I'll have to take your word on it, then, he replied, from the place he was at the door. I settled down with only a few hums in response, half hearing him as I began to stuff my mouth with such much food as I could, and I tried to hold back a moan at the flavors that coated my tongue, because it wasn't until it began to cooking when I began to realize just how starving I really was after all that training. God. And to be honest, I couldn't remember the last time I'd actually had opportunity to cook properly, that is. For as long as I could remember, it would only be scoffing up whatever I could manage as I travel from job to job. The odd time, though, when I got to go home and visit, would get the chance to cook with my eldest sister. I smiled at the memory, beginning to slow my pace of consumeration to flavor the moment as I ate. It was my sister's recipe, after all. I had to enjoy every bit and every bite with the same amount of love she used to make it with. I could almost picture it clearly as though it was yesterday. The joy it brought her not only to be creating things, but to spend time with her family. The light in her eye. The thought hit me like a punch in the gut. Swallowing a bit roughly, the taste became a bit sour in my mouth as I remembered that. My sister wasn't able to smile the way anymore. She couldn't do the things she loved the same way. That light I admired so long, that light was almost winked out completely, as if a candle had been in a tornado storm, trying to stay ablaze. I paused, looking down at the dish we used to make together before placing it back down onto the ground. I shouldn't be allowing myself to eat this. I didn't deserve to eat this without her. I shouldn't even have made the food in the first place. You idiot. I bit my tongue, getting up abruptly from my kneeling position on the ground, and I'd almost forgotten Akaza, but had Akaza had been there the whole time, but keeping an eye on me the way he usually did. "What's wrong?" he asked. I didn't answer right away, fighting the rising anger in my gut as I started to stare at him and then the dish, cursing myself for ever feeling worthy of having it in the first place. "Nothing," I said simply, beginning to clean up the half-eaten food I'd made. "I'm just tired. I want to sleep, that's all." I heard a second gasping hum before the demon, as I felt his eyes on me while I cleaned, but I honestly didn't give a damn whether he felt the lie in my words, because my mind was too busy screaming at myself. As I cleaned, I only reminded of why I was doing this, the training, the job I did. It was all to get stronger. It was all so that one day I could cook again with my sister and see that warm smile of hers once more. In the end, that was all that mattered to me. As I cleaned up, my movements became one steady rhythm that I allowed myself to fall into, suddenly just needing something to do. I vaguely remembered Akaza leaving the room, most likely mentioning where he was heading, but I hardly heard him as I worked, cleaning the entire house until it was spotless, working myself until I was so exhausted I couldn't stand, collapsing into my bed only to pass out immediately. And the next night, the hours I spent with Akaza was merely a repeat of yesterday. Except today, I couldn't even land one single hit. Not even one. Even after yesterday of being remembered of why I needed to beat him, it still wasn't enough. The wind around us had an icy roar that danced, throwing hit after hit at each other in a rhythm of movements that reminded me of the way I cleaned yesterday. It was a familiar feeling, and I allowed myself to once again get lost in it. Akaza blocked a hit to his side as I aimed for a second hit around his area he'd blocked, and I seethed in annoyance when he blocked it again. He bounced away from me, and for a moment I heaved, trying to control the way my lungs felt through the hilt of the flames. Burning, burning, burning. "You have to hone that emotion, Yin," he said, and I glanced at him as I took my ragged breaths. "I don't care," I rasped, getting back into an offensive position in my shaky form, and suddenly he was in front of me again, the same amount of speed I wasn't used to. Even so, I swung at him, twisting my body to track his own movements. "The key to getting stronger is controlling the way you feel," he said, while at the same time delivering a blow to the back of my knee, the action bringing me right down. The impact of my knees making contact with the ground was enough to make a yelp in surprise, only for me to be scrambling onto my feet, growling at him. "I don't care," I said again, breathing through my teeth. He only shook his head, arms crossed to his chest. "I need to work harder. I need to." Another hit, the strike being so fast as a snake bouncing its prey. Before I could even defend it or give it an attack on my own, Akaza was feet away from me once again. It took everything I had to bring myself to my feet, the same way I had been each and every time we trained, even when it felt like no progress was being made at all.